The Lien notice was zip-tied to my front gate before sunrise, bright orange against weathered wood like a warning tag on condemned property. I saw it when I stepped out with my coffee, and for a second I honestly thought someone had made a mistake. Then I read the header, Notice of Intent to File Property Lien, Willow Creek Estates HOA. My name, my farm, my land. Land my grandfather cleared in 1923 with a pair of mules and stubborn hands. Land my father nearly lost during the drought of '88 but didn't, because he refused to let bankers take what Sweat had already paid for. And now a gated subdivision that didn't even exist 2 years ago was threatening to put a lien on it because of dust, tractor dust. I stood there in the quiet morning air, staring at the neat legal font explaining that I owed $500 per day in environmental impact fines for allowing agricultural particulate to drift toward their luxury homes. Agricultural particulate, that's a fancy way of saying I farm my farm. Willow Creek Estates went up fast. 40 acres on my eastern border sold to developers who promised peaceful country elegance. They cleared trees, poured foundations, and built stone pillars at the entrance with a wrought iron gate that looks like it belongs in a country club brochure. There's only one road in and one road out of that place. It curves along the edge of my hayfield before connecting to the county highway. One entrance, one exit. Every resident, every delivery truck, every school bus uses that same stretch of pavement. When the first families moved in, I figured we'd mind our own business. I rise before dawn. I run cattle, cut hay, rotate crops. They host patio dinners and complain about lawn symmetry. Different lives, same zip code. But peace didn't last long. First came the emails, then the letters. Your tractors are operating too early. Livestock odor is affecting our outdoor enjoyment. Harvest dust is settling on patio furniture. Each complaint stamped with the HOA's logo like it carried authority beyond their decorative gates. I ignored them. County never said a word. State never said a word. Because farms make noise. Farms make smells. Farms make dust. That's not a violation. That's reality. But then Melissa Carter, HOA president, self-appointed queen of cul-de-sacs, decided to escalate. The certified envelope arrived 3 days before the notice hit my gate. Inside was a formal demand. Install HOA-approved dust suppression systems or face escalating fines, followed by a lien filing to protect community standards. Protect community standards. On land their community was built next to. Let me ask you something. If someone who moved in last summer tried to legally corner you over land your family has held for a century, would you panic? Or would you start reading every word they hope you woe? Because I didn't panic. I drove to the county records office. I didn't storm in. I didn't argue. I asked for subdivision filings and original easement documents tied to the Willow Creek development. The clerk brought out thick folders, maps rolled tight with age, survey stamps, signatures from decades back. I flipped through page after page until I found the clause my grandfather insisted on when he sold that 40-acre strip long before anyone imagined stone pillars and HOA bylaws. He had sold the land, but he retained something most people overlook: the underlying roadbed rights for the access strip that would one day become their entrance. The neighborhood has legal use of it through a recorded easement. They have the right to pass, the right to access, but ownership of the ground beneath that asphalt, the liability, the structural authority, that sits with me. I read that paragraph 3 times just to enjoy it properly, because easements aren't gifts, they're agreements, and agreements come with conditions. Maintenance authority, inspection rights, safety compliance powers. If structural issues arise, the landholder can initiate review and restrict access for repair. Not permanently, not maliciously, just legally, perfectly legally. I drove home slower than usual that day, thinking about that bright orange notice on my gate. They believed the word lien would scare me into compliance. They believed paperwork was a weapon only they could use. What they didn't realize was that the only road feeding their 86 luxury homes rests on paper older than their entire neighborhood. Paper signed by a farmer who thought 10 steps ahead. That evening I removed the lien notice from my gate, not angrily, calmly. Then I made 2 phone calls, one to a surveyor, one to an attorney. I requested a formal roadway condition review under the easement maintenance clause. Heavy construction trucks had rolled over that entrance for months during development. If there were sublayer cracks, erosion concerns, or drainage issues, I had not only the right but the obligation to assess them. Liability flows downhill fast when accidents happen, and I wasn't about to carry risk for a community threatening my livelihood. By the time the sun set, small white stakes marked sections along the entrance curve. Nothing dramatic, just quiet indicators that something official was beginning. Residents slowed down to look. Questions started spreading through their neighborhood app. And somewhere behind those stone pillars, I imagine Melissa Carter was still confident her lien threat would force me to install expensive dust systems by the end of the week. She had no idea she had just triggered a clause buried deep in county records, one that could turn her quiet gated shortcut into the most expensive stretch of pavement in the county. And I hadn't even made my real move yet. By Monday morning, the entrance to Willow Creek Estates didn't look so elegant anymore. Bright cones lined the curve where the road bends along my hayfield. and 2 survey trucks were parked on the shoulder with hazard lights blinking. A temporary sign read, "Structural assessment in progress, expect delays." It was calm, professional, completely legal. But inside that gated community, panic was already spreading. School buses had to idle. Commuters were stuck in a slow crawl. Delivery vans were being waved through one at a time while measurements were taken along the pavement seams. I stood at my fence line watching the procession, hands resting on weathered wood, saying nothing, because this wasn't retaliation. This was responsibility, the kind that comes with owning the ground beneath someone else's convenience. By noon, my phone rang. Melissa Carter didn't bother with pleasantries. "You're disrupting 86 households," she snapped. I let her finish. Then I calmly reminded her that the recorded easement clearly states the landholder retains maintenance authority and liability oversight. "If structural compromise exists," I said, "temporary access limitations are not optional. They're required." Silence followed, the kind of silence people fall into when they realize the script just flipped. You see, during construction, heavy concrete trucks had used that entrance daily. Months of weight stress. Minor cracking had already begun along the sublayer edges. Nothing catastrophic yet, but enough to justify a full engineering review. And once liability enters the conversation, insurance companies get nervous. Very nervous. By Wednesday, a preliminary report was drafted. Drainage weakness, subbase erosion risk, long-term integrity concerns if reinforcement wasn't performed. My attorney sent the HOA a certified letter outlining potential exposure should an accident occur without documented repair. The solution? Phased reinforcement over the next 30 days, partial closures, controlled access windows, and cost-sharing under proportional use impact guidelines. Estimated total maintenance projection over 2 years, $187,000. Their portion based on traffic volume, approximately $142,000. That's when the emergency meeting invite arrived. I attended. They sat around a polished conference table, tension thick enough to slice. Melissa's expression wasn't sharp anymore. It was tight, controlled. Their attorney cleared his throat and suggested mutual de-escalation. Translation: they wanted the lien gone quietly and the road left alone. I placed their original lien notice on the table between us. "You attempted financial leverage," I said evenly. "I responded with infrastructure review, both legal. The difference is, my paperwork predates your bylaws." One board member finally asked the question none of them wanted to say out loud. "Are you going to close the road completely?" Now let me ask you something. If someone threatened your livelihood first, would you slam the door in revenge? Or would you make sure they understood exactly how much that door costs before it shuts? Because I didn't need to close it. The possibility was loud enough. Within 48 hours, I received formal written withdrawal of the lien notice, a signed acknowledgement that my farm operations predated the subdivision and would not be subject to HOA oversight, and a cost-sharing agreement covering future structural maintenance, heavily in my favor. Repairs were scheduled in phases that minimized disruption. Traffic flowed again. The cones disappeared. Life returned to normal. But something else changed too. The complaint letters stopped. The dust violation emails stopped. Residents started waving when they passed my tractors instead of glaring. Funny how quickly respect grows when leverage is understood. Melissa Carter listed her house 6 months later. Turns out it's uncomfortable living behind gates when the ground beneath them belongs to someone else. Here's the part most people miss. I never raised my voice, never threatened, never retaliated illegally. I just read the fine print and let responsibility do the talking. They tried to place a lien on a farm that feeds cattle, grows crops, and stood long before their stone pillars were poured. What they didn't realize is that power isn't always loud. Sometimes it's buried in county records, waiting for the right moment to surface. So tell me, if you were in my boots, would you have handled it differently? Or would you have let the paperwork speak for itself? And if you enjoy stories where patience beats intimidation, make sure you hit like and subscribe. Because around here, the fields aren't the only things that get cultivated. Sometimes it's lessons.